talk about Albany. How do you think the governor's doing right now? You see the approval ratings, all of a sudden Albany's agreeing on stuff that you know better than me. They couldn't agree on what time it was before. What's going on in the Capital District? Because for a lot of people, they can't even recognize it.
A+. The governor has been outstanding. He gives no quarter to the legislature. He has toned down the sort of circus atmosphere of Albany. You notice, sorry guys, but you notice he doesn't give very many interviews, doesn't talk to too many people. And the reason is, I believe that he figured out that it was just exacerbating the acrimony on both sides. It was this little era we went through in Albany where everything had to be open, everything had to be transparent. Leaders' meetings, when you're trying to negotiate budgets, cannot be held in public because the minute you make a concession, you've offended people. You don't see it when unions and management just talk in this country, and you don't see President Obama negotiating with Speaker Boehner on television. But we had that going on in Albany, and some of us who really believed in open government bought into it, and we were wrong. Now you can see the results of a governor who spends 100% of his time on laws and on improving the quality of life in the state of New York instead of pleasing a couple of whining good government group people. And what he's been able to accomplish is to, I think, bring the finances of the state completely under control. He has passed landmark legislation like marriage equality for gay and lesbian citizens. He has been able to create a new higher educational system at SUNY where we will have 4 centers of learning that will compete with anywhere in the country. The governor has come to an agreement on taxation and at the same time budget cutting. He's reeled in some of the Albany bullies who were special interests that thought that they were running the government, not the legislature. And he has done it with a carrot and a stick, which is masterful. And I tell you, with all the talk about these tough governors, like one on the bordering state and others, and I actually like Governor Christie, but I don't think that you're seeing effective leadership results. This man is passing a budget not just on time. We've waited a whole generation to see somebody pass a budget on time. He passes the budgets early. So,
you know, I got to tell you,
doesn't get better than that.
We sat at this table with a lot of the guys, and we said we wouldn't wish what you had to deal with on our worst enemy with the likes of the Pedro Espadas and the Montserrats and all the rest, where forget about, wouldn't want him to be your elected official. You wouldn't want to sit at the same table with these guys. Were they the anomaly, or are there still a lot of folks like that in Albany? Forget about their own constituents. They don't even have the best state's interests at heart.
Well, you know, sometimes there is a constellation of events that, let's just say, are not working to the advantage of anyone who is in the executive branch. And during that period, 2007, 2008, 2009, that was when the full impacts of the recession hit. That was when we had a leadership crisis in the state because the governor had to resign. And so, for instance, people say to me, when there was an open Senate seat, why didn't you appoint yourself? And I tell them I couldn't because I didn't have a lieutenant governor. And I thought that if I appointed myself to the United States Senate, we wouldn't even know who's governing the state because those 4 or 5 senators who were weaving back and forth, only submitting their vote to the candidate who promised to give them the most. By the way, how are you a Democratic senator and then become the majority leader in the Republican conference in a week? Because the need to want to be in the majority was so great that they actually allowed themselves to be coerced and in many respects to be blackmailed. And it was an unfortunate thing, and that's why in July of 2009, I appointed a lieutenant governor, and the court sustained it, Richard Ravitch. But yes, believe me, for those who said they would not have wanted to be in my shoes during that whole period, believe me, they would not want to be.
A couple other issues here. Obviously, November fast approaching. What's your gut tell you about how not only the president's going to do, but how races both on the House and Senate level look here? It looks like Gillibrand's going to coast in New York, but he got a lot of contentious House races, and a lot of people say it could be top of the ticket's going to decide it one way or the other.
Three things. Now that I'm on WOR, you know, there is a presumption that because I was a Democrat, I'm just going to defend Democrats. And I think if you listen to the show, you find that I don't do that. I try to be as objective as possible. I think President Obama has done everything to assure that he would not be reelected this year, but he will be, because the Republican Party can't find a candidate who actually can focus on the issues that where the president would be vulnerable. President Obama will be reelected. It won't even be close.
And will that have coattails, you think?
No, because the Republicans are going to win the United States Senate. They'll maintain the House. The president will now govern with two parties who are actually against his point of view for his second term. And Kirsten Gillibrand, who I was vilified for appointing U.S. Senate, they won't get a candidate. They can get 40% of the vote against her. So the people who wrote those columns can explain it to the 60% of the public that will reelect her.
Finally, you're a sports fan like myself, and unfortunately, you're a Jet fan like myself. A year from now, we sit down, we say, you know, whether they did it for the right reason or trying to sell PSLs, was the Tebow move a stroke of genius, or did it just add more dysfunction to a dysfunctional locker room?
I would say that the Jets have created a circus atmosphere, but the Tebow appointment was an act of opportunity more than it was wisdom or poor judgment. These are the things you have to know. Number one, Tim Tebow, if you compare the two of us, I have a better arm. Tim Tebow is not a natural quarterback, and he can't throw. Number two, if the Denver Broncos didn't have such a great defense, you would never have heard of Tim Tebow because they would have lost all those games. He wasn't winning games 35-32 or something. They were winning games 13-7, 15-10. But the third thing you've got to know, Tim Tebow, with the possible exception of Michael Vick, may be the best running quarterback in the history of the NFL. So if you can't throw, but you run great, you put that player with a quarterback who throws well, but often has bad judgment, Mark Sanchez. And you take the two mediocrities and put them together, and I think that the Jets may not be the Super Bowl champions next year because they have other problems, like an offensive line that needs repair. But when you look up next year, people will not fault the Jets for having made the trade for Tim Tebow. And what did they give up for him? A fourth-round draft pick.
Exactly.
Hey, Richard, who was the Jets' fourth-round draft pick last year?
I'm struggling to remember myself.
I rest my case.
Yes, fair enough. Now, Governor, before you go, we hear you're involved with a roundtable, as we said, on OR Radio here. You're doing this, as you said, 2 hours a night. Tell everybody about it real quickly if they tune in, what they're going to hear.
We're going to do it on April the 5th from 4 to 7 p.m. at the historic Russian Tea Room. People are invited to come down and watch.
A little borscht, right?
A little borscht, and we will be talking about the issues of education and healthcare and homeland security, the major issues of our time. The stop and frisk issue will be part of it. It's part of Homeland Security, and obviously the struggles that the mayor and the police commissioner and the elected officials of New Jersey have had. And we'll have a pretty good discussion. My show is 4 to 6 on 710 AM WOR, but this will be an extra hour, 4 to 7, and we will have, for the first time, elected officials from the tri-state area, from Connecticut, New Jersey, as well as New York, talking about those major issues in a three-pronged discussion of what's important in the metropolitan area right now.
All right, good enough. And Governor, I want to thank you for a few minutes. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Richard.